Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be dealing with a garden disaster, but we might be dealing with it in bits and pieces because I have to keep a very close eye on Rafael. When we first came home from Sydney, things were looking pretty dire. Most things were a lot crisper than when we had left, and a lot of things looked like they were on death's door. This was after the first water, and to be honest, even just one round of watering made an enormous difference to how everything looked. We had ended up being in Sydney for so long that we missed the sunflower bloom, and even with my friend popping around every couple of days to water everything, some things just died and could not recover. And to be honest, I thought all my tomatoes were done for. This plant actually couldn't recover. It had snapped in a massive windstorm, which had also flopped over the sunflowers, ripped out a structure and ripped open a hole in the fence. But a lot of the damage to the tomatoes, which I initially thought was dire, was either wind damage, which you can see here where the vines have flopped over, or was just the effect of me not being there for nearly 2 weeks to actually pluck off the blighted leaves every day. Some things like this pot that was supposed to be filled with tansy and pyrethrum and chives to help deter bugs in the garden, it well and truly died. Unfortunately, I think this period of us being away dealing with emergency dog injuries unfortunately coincided with a point at which plants start to get a bit scraggly when the spring blooms have finished and have gone to seed, like these flannel flowers. And also there were obviously a lot of plants that should still be looking healthy but had dried out either because of lack of watering or crazy weather with the wind that ripped the enormous hole open in the fence. But the combination basically meant that the garden looked completely disastrous when we walked in, and I honestly think another 2 days away and we would have lost a lot. So it's not looking good. We've got a disaster on our hands and it's time to deal with it and patch this hole before little bird escapes. So one of the only things I could do was give the garden time and hope for a little bit of rain. And as you can see behind me, we have not had much rain at all in the last 5 weeks. So we're just going to do what we can, and maybe we only get a little bit done today, but at least we're not trapped in the bedroom all day again today. But the second they start playing, I'm gonna have to break it up. Now at the moment things actually look incredibly beautiful, and this is my favorite spot right here because the straw flowers are in bloom and we've got one random sunflower that's popped up, and it just looks stunning with the Galladia in the front and the salvia behind it. Hopefully you can see that these sunflowers have flopped right over in the horrific winds that we had while we were in Sydney, and they've had 10 days to recover and they're still flopped over. Thankfully the hole in the fence has been fixed, but this is the second time that spot has ripped open. He did put in some more security for us, but we'll see how long that lasts. So there's a lot to do, and what I think I'm going to start with is getting all the flowers out, harvesting any vegetables that need to come out. I did harvest another 4 kilos of zucchini yesterday, but the yellow zucchini had like a really hard skin, like a break your knife kind of hard skin. So I'm going to go through and look for anything that needs harvesting, cut all the flowers out, and I might get rid of the sunflowers before waiting for their seeds because it annoys me when they flop over. They look so ugly. I want the space for planting and they are driving my skin crazy. I don't know if any of you guys have had this problem, but touching the sunflowers just makes my skin go wild. So between that, the tomatoes and the ticks, and to be honest, the blazing sun, I am hopefully all covered up and protected, but I think I'm going to get rid of these guys. We also need to get rid of the lettuce. It is done. And I don't know if that's because we've had massive temperature shifts. So the last couple of nights have been like 10 degrees, which is crazy for summer. And maybe like 2 weeks ago max, there was snow not that far from where we live, which is mental. So
Some of the things have bolted because of the crazy weather. I think some naturally went to seed, and some were definitely traumatized by the combination of the wind drying the water out and not as regular watering while we were away. So things have just kind of turned into a giant mess. Some of it has rebounded. In fact, a lot more of it has rebounded than I thought would. But it's still a disaster zone, and we need to get our summer seedlings in now that it is 10 days plus into summer. 10 days. It's the 10th of December, so it's definitely 10 days. I know that some of you might be like, hang on a second, you only just released a mid-spring harvest video, like, not that long ago. Well, between Rafa and Sydney and having absolutely no internet for a week, we're about a month behind on the video releases, and I also didn't film a lot because we were in emergency with puppies, or locked in a room with puppies trying to keep them from moving while they're stoned. So life has been a bit challenging. We haven't filmed as much. The timeline's all messed up, but we're in summer now and everything is beautiful and in bloom, but some is traumatized and some has gone to seed and some has bolted because of the crazy weather. And I think it all happened at the same time, and that has meant that it just looks like a disaster zone and we need to get in there and tidy it up. The other thing is we need to put the other arch up. I don't think I'm going to put it back where it was because it just falls over every time the wind blows, because there is, like, the ground there is not as flat or as compacted. So I think I'll put it on the other side of this one where I was originally thinking of doing it. And I've got some more cucumbers which have now germinated because it has been so long since we were in the garden. But I don't know how much we'll get done because I'm really tired. I didn't expect to, but we've had a 3.5 hour nap today. And it's just because I've been up all night with Rafa trying to get him to settle when he's stoned, or after he's been asleep all day, then he doesn't want to sleep at night. I've got to make sure he doesn't hurt himself, and he keeps jumping on and off the bed. And honestly, you guys, it has been just a really rough couple of weeks. I know you might say, he's just a dog. He's my bubba, number one. And number two, the vet was very clear that he might have just strained his ligament. And if I don't keep him relatively confined for at least a week, he could rupture that ligament. And that is going to be a minimum of $3,000, more like $8,000 to have the surgery, plus 8 weeks of total confinement, plus periods of non-weight bearing, which with 2 dogs is just going to be, just too hard. The other thing we've been dealing with is Little Bird has become a fence jumper. She found the low points in the fence. I thought I had blocked them off, and over she went. And yeah, that's been a lot of our garden time lately, stopping Birdie going over the fence. For right now, the dogs are relatively well entertained. They are not jumping all over each other, which is the main thing. And it needs to stay that way so that Rafi doesn't bust his knee. But I don't know how much we're going to be able to get done today, but this might happen in bits and pieces, this garden clean out. So hopefully you guys understand, and let's just get to it before the wind gets too much worse and we lose whatever's left of today and my sanity. No. Here, puppies. Snackies. Who wants a snacky? No running, Rafi. We doesn't want to bust a knee.
It takes a couple seconds for her to shake off the medicine, a couple seconds more to know it's me. It takes a couple minutes, then we're right back in it, right where we left off the other week.
The hollyhocks had started to form blooms since we were in Sydney, and a huge number of ladybirds had found their way into the garden beyond my birdie and started to lay eggs, which was pretty incredible to see. Also, the celery that had been planted in winter decided to go to seed because the nights were so cold. We had zucchinis popping up, carrots going to seed, and arbors falling over. It is all happening, and there is so much to do. I'm kind of overwhelmed. It's been a crazy couple of weeks with Rafa going to emergency first for eating bluebell bulbs and then for his knee injury and then entering a period of confinement. It's been a lot and it's been really hard to get into the garden, so things have kind of gotten away from me a bit, and this period of not having enough water and having really strong windstorms and me not being there to deal with it has just made it so much worse.
It takes a couple hours for she's tired of your flowers. Reminds her.
A new and fun thing that we now have to deal with that I discovered when we got home is fruit fly. So apparently these don't just bite fruit, they bite veggies as well. I didn't realize they attacked zucchinis, and this has been the reason why I have lost so many zucchinis. I had been wondering what had been causing my zucchinis to go all squishy and gross when they're little, and now I know. We've got a mass infestation of fruit fly.
Walking through the forgotten garden. It seems like rain's gonna fall. Leaves are dancing gracefully.
I was pretty happy with my harvests and my weird strawberries and the abundance of flowers that I had to bring in to dry, including these beautiful seed pods. I harvested some of the seeds as a Christmas gift for a friend, and I also got these straw flowers hung up and ready to be dried for the Christmas tree. At this time that I'm recording the audio to this, it is obviously after Christmas, and I have already released the Christmas vlog where I decorated my Christmas tree with the straw flowers, and it looked amazing. So I'll link that video below. But I know I'm behind in the video editing. Life's been really hard, but it's so lovely to be able to grow these straw flowers and use them as decorations around the house. It just really lifts things a lot.
It's a little time for me.
The flower heads that popped off the stems I plan to use in Ruby's fairy garden, which is also in that Christmas vlog and will be linked below.
Relearning how to breathe.
In order to try and get more gardening done the next day, we needed to get these doggies tired first so that they would stay inside and rest, as they started rumbling pretty early yesterday when we were outside together, and it's just not feasible for Rafa to not damage himself and be outside chasing butterflies and birds and birdie. So we went for a really long bushwalk to start the day, and we found these beautiful fossils fossil imprints in the stones, and we also discovered some beautiful wildlife. We saw some lovely black cockatoos, and Birdie spotted a couple of echidnas, which is just so amazing that we can go for walks and see these incredible animals just out and about doing their thing. We also spotted a pretty massive moth, which I think would have freaked Birdie out if she'd noticed it. But once we finished our lovely walk, we headed back and I got back into the garden. Plan was to tidy up and try and make some space for the seedlings that I had ready to come through. I wanted to get the tomatoes properly suspended and supported. They'd grown a lot since I was last out here, and some of the branches were flopping on the floor, so I wanted to get them off the ground and get everything well supported, so if we had another windstorm they would be not as damaged as they were last time. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to remove the blighted leaves. Then I was moving on to general cleanup, like getting rid of the sunflowers, tidying up some of the scrappy pansies that had kind of sprawled since their spring prime, and getting rid of excess leaves on zucchinis and pulling out lettuce that had gone to seed.
So I think that's enough for today. I've got the zucchinis all strung up on their poles, although they look a little bit rough. I've obviously still got a rather large amount of mess to deal with, but because I have everything bird-proofed, I can't just bring the garbage bin in the fence anymore. I've got to drag all that through the house or get it in the compost bin. We've got most of the lettuce out. There's still some iceberg lettuce underneath there doing well, and a volunteer tomato. We pulled up some of the carrots. I thought they would all be done given so many have gone to seed, but I guess it's just the crazy weather we've been having. I've got all the tomatoes plucked and propped up except these 2 Roma tomatoes. All the other ones are re-stabilized against their fence posting, except the beefsteak tomato did not survive. Hopefully the removal of the sunflower means that the basil will actually get going because there's a little bit more sunlight. There's obviously a lot of cleaning up to do, but at least we've got some more ground space to deal with, and at least things are a little bit more organized. I'm going to go and pluck the flowers off that basil over there. You should not be flowering. So this is day 2's efforts, and we still got a long way to go. But I'm going inside now because it is piping hot, and my very cute stoned assistant has disappeared on me. And you know what they say, you got to keep an eye on the stoner in the group. So yeah, we'll deal with all the rest of this tomorrow. I found my stoner. He looks pretty stoned. Hi, buddy. And there was one zucchini hidden in amongst all the sunflowers.
A couple of rainy days later, I was back in the garden trying to get this beautiful but troublesome archway to stay put in the garden. I have been progressively moving it along to new places in this front area of the garden patch, and I thought I would try one more spot just because it was more convenient for my cucumbers to grow up here and cast a little bit of shade for my lettuce. But if it falls out in the next windstorm, I don't know where I'm going to put it. I'm just going to have to find an area where the soil is a little bit more compacted, which is hopefully going to be hard to do because I'm trying to add compost to the garden as soon as it becomes available, and I'm using a lot of mulch and mulching things in quite heavily because it is breaking down very quickly in the heat, and I'm hoping to just keep building the soil up, but we got to try and get this silly archway to stay put. I couldn't get it perfectly level, so I think at some point I'm going to have to use some rope and pull it towards one of the star picket fence that is part of my keeping birdie inside the boundaries of the property fencing that I've had to erect, but it was good enough for today. I got on to putting in some of the seedlings that have been waiting for us to come back from Sydney and waiting for us to have time to deal with them, and I wanted to get more lettuce in the ground. I don't eat a lot of salad, but I'm intending to, so I wanted to plant more. My best friend loves to harvest my lettuce, so I wanted to make sure there was enough for both of us, and yeah, I just needed to get more in the ground. So this is a mix of loose leaf lettuce and more iceberg. I love iceberg lettuce. A couple of mine rotted after the crazy rain we had, and then the 6-week dry spell. So we've had some ridiculous weather and the plants have suffered, so I thought I better plant some more. And also I kind of wanted to make sure that I would have some that was ready a couple of weeks after the first lot. I didn't want it all to be ready at the same time, so I needed to do some succession planting. And I also had planted some perennial Australian native flowers like the billy button and so it was time to get those in the ground so that they could hopefully bloom for the summer harvest. They won't be done for this year's Christmas tree, but you know, one can dream. The cucumber seedlings that I planted weeks and weeks and weeks ago have finally got going. I needed to actually help these climb up the trellising and up the bird-proof fence, so I suspended them with some soft plastic covered wire, and hopefully they will keep on growing up and be very productive for me. They were extremely slow to get going, and much like my capsicum, which have really failed to launch at all, and my germination rate of my capsicum is just pathetic. I think it's just because we've had such cold nights, and it's really taken weeks for any sort of warm weather to get going, and it's so inconsistent. It has really been a very surprisingly cool summer, but I guess that's the thing, you need to plan for your harvests to not always be what you intend them to be, and preserve what you can when you get a good harvest so that you've got a bit of a buffer for the next harvest. Previously along this fence line, I wanted to get a whole bunch of snow peas in and have the whole fence line covered in snow peas. I'm trying to stop Rafa from getting into this weird little dumping area that there is at this rental property behind this little veggie patch. But thankfully, my gradual increasing fencing has stopped him from doing that. But the snow peas all kind of got blight. I don't know if that was because they were near the sunflowers and they didn't get enough sunlight. I'm inclined to think it was actually because they got rained on so heavily after they germinated that they never really stood much of a chance. But this time I'm putting cucumbers at the base of the archway that's in the back corner of the veggie patch, and then along the back wall I'm putting all my bush beans. It was just too hard with the sunflowers in there to actually see if there were beans to harvest, and because the sunflowers unexpectedly really irritated my skin, I couldn't really get in there to harvest any snow peas that there were. So this time I'm not planting anything in front of the beans. I'm just going to have them going up the trellising, and then I'll just have to climb over some zucchinis to get in there, and maybe some capsicums if I can get any to germinate, which would be really lovely. There's a never-ending list of things that I want to get done, but for now, everything has been refertilized and remulched and watered back in, and all I can do is wait now and see how things go. So thank you for hanging out with us, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.